Do you have any questions about these steps? Okay. So now let's go on to the idea that you wanted to review today, the idea of adding two numbers with a different sign. So what would be an example of adding two numbers with a different sign? Yeah, -1 plus 6, maybe even 6 plus -1. Exactly. Good. So our first step is to find the absolute value of both numbers. And you've shown that you're very good at finding the absolute value of everything, which is good. Our second step is to subtract our smaller absolute value from our greater absolute value. The way that I like to write this, if you want to write this shorthand, is just the bigger minus the smaller absolute value. You can write it both ways, either way. And then we're going to use the sign of the number with the bigger absolute value for the answer. That's important. It's the number with the bigger absolute value, not the bigger number. Okay, good. So now that we have these steps written down, we can use them whenever we're doing this problem on a homework, on a test. If you can use notes on a test, if that's allowed. Then it should be a lot easier for us to remember. We don't have to use our brains as much, which I like, personally. Less I have to think, the easier my life is. So let's take the example that you brought up. -1 plus 6. So, what's the first step that we just wrote down to add two numbers with different signs? Right, so we have these two different processes, adding numbers with the same sign and adding numbers with different signs. So good job correcting yourself. We're adding two numbers with different signs. So absolute value of 1 is 1, absolute value of 6 is 6. Now what's our second step? Okay, so I have a question for you. Are we adding two numbers with the same sign or two numbers with different signs? Okay, so we have this number -1 and 6. So this number's positive and this number's negative, right? So these two numbers have a different sign. Exactly. And what number do we subtract from what number? And why is it 6 from 1 and not 1 from 6? Mm-hmm. 6 minus 1 is 5. And is my 5 going to be negative or is it going to be positive? And why is it positive instead of negative? And our bigger absolute value in this case is 6. Our 6 we decided was positive. Good. So do you have any questions about this process? Maybe how do I know when to use which one of these steps, or how do I find which number to subtract, anything like that? Okay, good. Great job. So you just walked me through how to do that problem. Let's do something a little bit more tricky, but not too much. We can still use the same steps, and it shouldn't be a problem. So let's say we have 8.4 plus -2.6. Oh, plus, there we go. Alright, so we have some decimals. Steps are exactly the same. What's going to be my first step to solve this problem? And what's the absolute value of negative 2.6? What's going to be my second step? Good, exactly. So we're deciding which one of these to use. I'm glad that you saw, okay, this one's negative, this one's positive. So we're walking through our second version of this problem. So which number do we subtract from which number? And why is it 8.4 minus 2.6 instead of the other way around? Yes, exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay. Now, without using a calculator, how can I subtract these two numbers? Yes. So I get 5.8. I have a question for you. Why is my decimal right here instead of back here or up here? Exactly, right? When we're doing subtraction, let's say if this had another digit, we did 18.0 minus 6.0, right? We keep our decimal in the exact same place. Good. Okay, final step. Is this 5.8 positive or negative? Boom. All right, you're sounding like a pro right now. You just walked me through two problems without any help. So do you feel a little bit more comfortable with these types of problems where we're adding numbers of two different signs? Good. Do you want to practice a few more of these, or do you want to try to practice some subtraction problems? Okay, let's try doing this with fractions. Sound like a plan? All right. 2/3 plus negative 4/2. Okay. My process is going to be exactly the same, except what do I have to do before I add or subtract these two numbers? Let's find our least common denominator. So, how do I find the least common denominator of these two fractions? What are my multiples of 2? Mm-hmm. 10? Mm-hmm. Okay. Do I have enough multiples to find my common denominator here? And what's my common denominator? And why is it 6 instead of 4 or 3? Both 3 and 2 are multiples of 6, exactly. And this is the smallest number that they are multiples of as well. Okay, good. So, how can I rewrite the fraction 2/3 to have a denominator of 6? Okay, so it sounds like you're working through both fractions. Let's start with this fraction right here. Let's make sure we have this one down. So you said we had to multiply 3 by 2 to get 6, right? Do we have to do anything else to this fraction? Or can we just multiply the denominator by 2? Okay, good. And I multiply the top by what? Exactly. Good. Okay, good. Okay, so we have this fraction. Multiply across 4/6. Now our second fraction, you said we had to multiply 2 by 3. What do we have to multiply the numerator by? And you said 4 times 3 was 12. Do I multiply these together? Do I add them? Do I subtract them? What do I do with the denominators? Exactly. Okay, good. So now we have 4/6, right? Because we decided that 2/3 was the same as 4/6. Plus, we decided that 4/2 was the same as 12/6. Okay, now can we add these two fractions together? And why can we add them together now? And why couldn't we add them together before? Exactly. Good. So, now I can follow my steps that we know, that you have written down. So how can I add these two numbers together? And what am I subtracting? (4/6) over negative 12/6. I'm subtracting 4 over 12. Negative 12 minus 4. Okay. So, what was our first step when we add two numbers of different signs? Exactly. So, if we stick to the script every time, we're going to get the right answer. So what's the absolute value of 4/6? And what's the absolute value of negative 12 over 6? Now what's my second step in adding two numbers with different signs? Can you say that one more time? Okay. So the step was to subtract the smaller absolute value from the bigger absolute value. So we do bigger minus smaller. So you're saying that 4/6 is bigger than 12/6? Okay, good. And why is 12/6 bigger than 4/6? Yeah, because 12 is bigger than 4, right? Because we have the same denominators, we can directly compare numerators. It's kind of hard to compare fractions when they have different denominators. But if we think about 4/6, we can think of 4 slices of a 6-slice pizza versus 12 slices of a 6-slice pizza. Which doesn't really make sense, but we can see that 12 slices is bigger than 4 slices. Okay, so we do 12/6 minus 4/6. And what does this equal? How do we subtract fractions with the same denominator? So 12 minus 4, which is equal to 8. And do I subtract my denominators? Do I keep it the same? Do I add them? What do I do? Exactly, right? In addition and subtraction of fractions, we keep the denominators the same. In multiplication and division, we multiply. Okay, good. So we get 8 over 6. Now, is 8 over 6 positive or is it negative? Okay, and why is it negative instead of positive? And we decided that 12/6 was bigger than negative 4/6. Good. Okay, do you have any questions about this problem? Okay, maybe how do I decide which fraction is bigger? Or how do I find the least common denominator? Or how do I subtract fractions with the same denominator? Anything like that? Okay, good. So, subtracting fractions with the same denominator is the same idea as adding fractions with the same denominator. So when we add fractions with the same denominator, how would we add these two fractions? Good. So the idea of subtracting fractions with the same denominator is very similar to adding fractions with the same denominator. We keep the denominator the same, and we subtract the numerators. And we do the left numerator minus the right numerator. So in this case, we would do 2 minus 1, which is equal to 1. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do another quick example. 27 over 5 minus 4 over 5. I keep my denominator the same. I can only add these fractions because the denominator is the same. And then I subtract my numerators. So I do 27 minus 4, left minus right, and I get 23/5. So, how would I subtract these two fractions? Good. So that's an easy way to subtract fractions. Now, this problem right here, 4 over 6 minus 1 over 6, kind of looks like the problems that we were doing when we were subtracting numbers with different signs. Do you remember that? For example, we did 8 minus 7. And our process with this was to rewrite this as addition. Do you remember that? Right, so our strategy to subtract numbers with different signs was to turn it into addition. So another way to think about this, I can rewrite this 4 over 6 minus 1 over 6 as 4 over 6 plus negative 1 over 6. Right, because our idea was if we subtract numbers with two different signs, we add the opposite. The opposite of 1/6 is negative 1/6. We change the subtractions to addition. For the top, is it... this is 4 over 6, and then minus 1 over 6. So this is positive. Can you see that one more time? How is it different from the ones up top? Like these ones right here? Yeah, so the process is the same. I'm just trying to explain to you that normally our process for subtracting numbers with two different signs is to change the problem to addition. Now here I kind of just took a shortcut, which really you shouldn't do. I just wanted to show you that this is sort of an easy way to do it, but the proper way to do it is to do it like we did any of the previous problems. So technically, if I was doing this properly, which I should, I would rewrite this as 2 over 6 plus negative 1 over 6. I would rewrite this 27 over 5. How could I rewrite this as addition? Right. Okay, good. And we know how to add numbers of two different signs, right? So let's finish this one right here. 4 over 6 plus negative 1 over 6. How do we add how do we add numbers of two different signs? And we do the absolute value of 4 over 6. Absolute value of negative 1 over 6 is 1 over 6. 4 over 6 is bigger than 1 over 6. So I do 4 over 6. Right? I do my bigger absolute value minus my smaller absolute value. And then once I get to this position, well, at this point, you could say you can rewrite it again. So, yeah, really, I would just use this shortcut right here. Unless the only thing where it's going to get tricky is if, for example, we had 1 over 6 minus 2 over 6. But I'll show you what to do in this situation. So here we subtract 1 minus, right, so okay. So our denominator stays the same. And we subtract 1 minus 2. And what's 1 minus 2? It's 1, negative 1, right? So it becomes negative 1/6. So that's the only thing you have to watch out for when you're doing this process, is if you have a number that's bigger on the right side, right? So for example, denominator stays the same. We do 3 minus 4. What's 3 minus 4? Right, so our answer is negative. Does that make sense? Okay, do you have any questions before we wrap up about subtracting these fractions? Okay, good. Sorry if rewriting everything was kind of confusing. I was just trying to show you that this is how we do this process normally. But it turns out that it just kind of puts us back in the same spot, right? After we did this process and changed it to addition, we just ended up with the same exact problem. So, really, at that point, you just subtract the numerators from each other. Okay, good. Okay, so, that's all the time we have.